The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello, and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by...
that creepy sewer guy that is Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are also he, him.
So this week we're also joined by a very special guest. We're really excited to have him on. We've got Refe Tuma with us, the author of Francis and the Monster.
Hey, Reef, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Excited to join you guys on this great podcast.
Yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah, we're really excited. I've really enjoyed your book, so I was really excited to be able to talk to you about it.
Can I say this? I want to say that if this was made into a movie, this would be what I call a Christmas movie. It's weird to say that, but it's like like Lord of the Rings or even Harry Potter and all that. Just it's something like the whole family can go see and enjoy around Christmas time.
Yeah, I like that. There's even a little bit of a snowstorm thrown in there for good measure. Yep.
Yeah.
One of the fun things about writing this book was getting to explore some traditions and some festivals and holidays that are not American centric, setting the book in Europe and Switzerland specifically, and getting to kind of explore some of the holidays and traditions that they have over there that tie into the story a little bit was a lot of fun. So no Christmas, but certainly some fun wintertime traditions.
What's that holiday called? Chagatta?
Chagatta.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's my best attempt at pronouncing it correctly.
Better than what I did, so fair enough.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too. There was a lot of little bits, and there was like the stuff with the bear pits, and I was like, "What is like? This is a strange pull." And then I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh no, that's like legitimately a thing there." Like that. Okay, you didn't just make that up out of nowhere.
Yeah, you
absolutely.
Did your research.
Yeah, and I always specify. I did my research, and then I took some creative liberties with all of it. So I don't pretend to be an expert on Switzerland or Swiss culture, but I certainly have a deep appreciation for it and wanted to let the character of the city of Bern, Switzerland, really play a major role in the story and give it a lot of its color and character and context. So that was one of my favorite parts of the writing process.
Yeah, you definitely did make the city come alive. It's like you really feel like you're there as you're reading through the story.
Yeah, and I appreciate it because initially whenever I was reading, I was like, oh, this is going to be kind of a world-trotting or globe-trotting story, right? But no, it's centralized in one town, but you go through the entire city.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore in that city. It's the city of Bern is the old town section of Bern dates back to the medieval era. I mean, it's been around for centuries, and most of the architecture and the buildings and the streets and some of the structures around the river they date back to, I think, I'm probably misremembering this, but I think like the 1600s. And so, hundreds of years of history all built up in that old town, and just the incredible architecture and the red clay roofs and everything. It was just, it really drew me in as soon as I started looking into it as a place where the story might be set.
So have you been there?
I was hoping to go, and then my plans were derailed, as so many plans were, by the entire world locking down a couple of years ago. Yeah. So that was really my chance, and the pandemic kind of took that chance away. But I really tried to. I did a lot of talking back and forth with some museum curators in the city, and did some video tours and like virtual tours and things like that, just to try to get as best I could a feel for really being there. But I absolutely hope to get a chance to go now that the lockdown has ended and things have opened up a little bit. I'm hoping to get the opportunity to do that soon.
Yeah, I feel like you show up with your book and it'll be a passport right in. They'll welcome you with open arms.
So about the book. So obviously there's a lot of names from the history of Frankenstein going all throughout it. We've got Fritz from the original movie. We have Shelley and Mary and a few other people. Mm-hmm. What would be the biggest influence on this, would you say? Would you say it's more the movie or the book or both?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the seed for this story, kind of the real inspiration for this, came kind of in sort of a two-hit combo. There was obviously Frankenstein, and for me the movie was the entry point, but then I think the contrast between what you get with the movie as an introduction to the world of Frankenstein, the contrast to what you then read in the book, and just kind of the difference in tone and the depth of the themes and things that you get in the book that are really, you get them a little bit in the movie, but it's a totally different experience, and yet, really complementary. It just shows kind of how varied the different Frankenstein interpretations and the stories that can come out of that can be. But then it was also kind of the second piece, really, that ended up taking the love of the Frankenstein movie and the original book was, and kind of taking that and turning it into a story that felt like it was something that I had to tell, something that was mine, was actually when I happened to rewatch the Magician's Apprentice section of the movie Fantasia. And obviously, The Magician's Apprentice is a story that dates back, well before Fantasia. It's one of the oldest stories that's still kind of in circulation, I guess you could say. But I rewatched that, and seeing the way that this Magician's Apprentice, Mickey in this case, he really wants to jump ahead of where he's at as in his studies with his master, and he's doing all these menial chores and feels like he's not getting his due. He's not getting his opportunities that he deserves. So he starts taking matters into his own hands and ends up creating just an absolute nightmare for himself, and has to deal with that, and ends up creating this terrible situation that is all his fault. And that I love that story. And when I started to kind of see it, when I started to realize how much it reminded me of the Frankenstein story, those two inspirations, those two kind of seeds started to create something new, some third thing in my mind that ended up becoming Francis and the Monster.
Yeah, I definitely can see the Magician's Apprentice is kind of Francis's whole vibe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when that idea first came, I was actually studying film at the time, had a brief stint in film school, and that was kind of what I dreamt of being at the time was a director, and I was very into stop motion animation. And so I always kind of saw it as being this stop motion animation short. And at the time, it was very much a kind of a tragic morality tale, and the character was this horrible little boy who had no redeeming qualities and really deserved everything that he got at the end. But as I started playing with that concept and the idea, it started to take on a lot more shades of gray and really sort of started to evolve into a totally different character. And Frances came out of that, and I'm really, really happy with where she ended up and who she ended up being and how her story ended up coming together.
Yeah, Frances is a really, really strong protagonist that, talking about the original novel, like having the protagonist here be, a young girl like Mary Shelley, like that felt right. But yeah, I mean, she's just such a rich character with like, the anxiety that she deals with. I really like the way that you kind of handle neurodivergence and like social fears and being outside of your comfort zone. Like, I think that's something that, kids reading this, I'm sure a lot can relate. And if they can't, they can probably say like, oh, this maybe will help me understand my friend who sometimes doesn't want to do things or, kind of feels weird when we go to the mall or whatever. I guess the mall is an outdated reference at this point. But wherever youths go to hang out.
When we're playing Roblox together over Discord. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write Frances. And I think that just kind of the idea that there are so many different types of intelligence, and Frances is very much focused on one of those types of intelligences. She has these brilliant parents. She has this legendary scientist for a great grandfather, and so she really sees one path towards kind of validating herself or feeling that kind of validation as who she sees herself to be. And I think that everybody she meets along the way sort of shows her a slightly different path towards being a whole person or having something to contribute to the world or to a friendship or even to her own life. And so it was really fun to be able to kind of take this character who really hasn't gotten out much, to say the least, and has a very limited worldview that's she's kind of inherited from the family business. And really throwing her in situations where she had what she needed to get to a certain point, and then she really needed to start relying on other people to get the rest of the way. And I think that's just that ended up being really the fun of writing this story, was throwing her together with these very different characters and just sort of seeing what happened, what came out of that.
Yeah, each character is very interesting. As the aforementioned, there's a sewer guy. What was the alchemist lady's name? Was it?
Madame Melina Moon.
Melina, thank you. Yeah, she was great.
Yeah, she's a really, because like that's a character that like to start with, she's very like intimidating and kind of scary and mysterious. And in a lot of versions of this story, like I could see her just staying that. But like as they don't spend that much time with her. They're there, an hour or two in the shop. But like she really opens up as this very kind and caring woman who like, genuinely wants to, make sure these kids are safe and that, things work out for them. And yeah, I thought that was a really, really nice development in a very short period of time with her.
Yeah, she was a lot of fun. It was fun to get into her backstory a little bit and kind of imagine where she came from and who she was, and then kind of letting her dole that out in her own way. In her, she letting her kind of decide what she shared of that and why, and Frances' reaction to who she was and what she learned. I think that was a lot of fun.
Also, do you know Helga? Because I feel like you know this character to a degree. Because I've met Helga before.
Helga, she is one of the, there are two characters in this book that went onto the page like fully formed and never changed. And one of them was Hobbs, and the other was Helga. And I genuinely have no idea where Helga came from, but. She just, when, in any great monster story, I feel like there is the bystander who just gets way too wrapped up in their role as the bystander. Right. And so, that's kind of that's a character that I've always loved. I don't know if it's a real trope or if it's just something that tends to, that I've noticed along the way, but she just really, really enjoys the spotlight a little bit too much, and getting that close encounter is all she needed. And she was off.
Yeah, loved it.
Well, speaking of the other character you mentioned, Hobbs. So like, we were talking a lot about like the names being references to things. So is Hobbes, is that name? The only thing I could think of was like Thomas Hobbes, which seems like a little bit of a stretch, but
No, that's one of the few. That is not an Easter egg to any Frankenstein lore. There are others that are deeper cuts that maybe you noticed or maybe you didn't, but Hobbes is not one of them. Hobbes is, I think that he is kind of the counterpoint, I think, to sort of what Frankenstein is. He's kind of an anachronism in the book because he's obviously far beyond what was possible in 1939.
Well, to a degree, he's far beyond what's possible today.
Absolutely, yeah. But at the same time, so is Frankenstein. And so, but what I think kind of where he came from, I don't know that this is really like hindsight because as with so many things that a writer does, it just sort of happened. And now I'm kind of like, why did I do it that way? Where did he come from? But I think he's kind of a counterpoint to Frankenstein. He's sort of like a flip side, like another possible alternate universe Frankenstein, where instead of being this kind of new creation in this terrifying, strong adult body, he's really kind of this old soul in this new technology, and it's kind of the exact opposite in some ways, but still somebody who was created and has to come to terms with that.
That's right. Very nice.
And the way that his relationship with Francis develops over the course of the story is, like, it kind of snuck up on me because, like, it doesn't, like, the story's about the monster and Francis trying to, but like the way that she like kind of resents him and then slowly like becomes friends with him, it was really a compelling part of the story, and the way that his situation kind of ends, I don't know how spoilery we want to get here, but like, the tragedy there was surprising, and I was not expecting that. It got to me.
Yeah.
What did you do that to us at the end?
I know. I'm sorry.
Really
I'm sorry. Well, with Hobbes, her story really begins with Hobbes, and he is. I think what was interesting as the story kind of was developing as I was drafting it and revising it, her relationship with Hobbes and kind of what he does to her, the way he changes her dynamic when she's left at home alone by her parents. Really kicks off everything that follows. And so it kind of only seemed fitting that would be kind of the relationship that sort of defined her arc and the way that she changed and the way that she developed throughout the story. So she, in a lot of ways, he's as much the catalyst for the story as the monster is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So also you chose a very interesting time. This is the dawn of World War II, which this is setting. So is it obviously a setup because we have, it's not really a spoiler. It's kind of at the beginning. Byron is jockeying more or less. He seems like he's going to be a war profiteer, or he wants weapons. And so is that kind of where you're angling, or what would you think with that?
What interested me about that point in history and that place in the world is that you have this total upheaval of Europe and eventually the world. And then in the middle of it, you have this pocket of neutrality where, the war was certainly impacting things, even in those early days, and continued to in ways that we're only just starting to learn just how much the war impacted Switzerland and as a neutral place. But the way that you have this pocket of relative safety in the middle of all this kind of looming chaos and change and war and violence, and it just made sense that there would be these men who looked at all of that from their place of relative safety, their bubble, and said, I can make a whole lot of money off of this. And I imagine that there were, and Mr. Byron is kind of the fictional representation of that. But he's somebody that you look around even now and you see people like this everywhere. And you see them making these selfish decisions and angling and exploiting our fears and exploiting our prejudices and the way that we look at each other and people who are different from us. And they look at that and they say, this is going to make me a whole lot of money if I can spin this the right way. And so that's really who Mr. Byron is. And he kind of shows his cards right at the beginning there. In his first conversation with Frances, and tells her exactly who he is. And so I think that's World War II, and especially right as it was kicking off. I just imagine that as a time where there were a lot of opportunists who were starting to look ahead and say, if I lay the groundwork now, I'm going to make a fortune. This is going to make me.
Yeah, I think it's it's pretty common within like books like aimed at young people that like the adults tend to be the sort of like the antagonist, whether it's because they're ignorant of like the secret world that kids are aware of, or whether it's that they're like just intentionally villainous. And I feel like Byron obviously leans towards like intentionally villainous, but then you have like the constable who has like kind of a mix. Yeah, like there's part of him that is like, obviously he's kind of like hung up in like religion and like mob mentality and like, concerned about like blasphemy. But there's also, he's just like, a cop who sees like a street
maybe
kid.
A little overzealous, but
right. Yeah. And, he is, I think, he's got that kind of zeal in him already. And I think that he kind of has this grandiose idea of who he is and what his role is, but the monster and just the idea that the monster, it's possible to do something like that, to create something like that, I think is kind of the spark that ends up making his that zeal turn into something that's a lot more dangerous. But even Frances herself, as she is chasing the monster, he's chasing her. And as the monster sows chaos and destruction just by being what it is and who it is, he sees all that, and he doesn't believe that there is a monster, so he thinks it's her. And she's coming down from this great mansion and causing all these problems. And he just he won't stand for it. He just can't handle it. And she ends up becoming a target of this zeal, even before the monster really ignites it and turns it into something else. But yeah, the adults in this book, I think there's risks with making the adults, most, if not all the adults in the book, kind of these antagonist characters. But at the same time, I remember as a kid when I would look at the actions of adults and the choices that they made and the things that they said, the things that they tried to do or convince me of or make me do, it's hard not to look at adults as a kid and not feel some sense of antagonism. It's like they're making these choices that I would never make because, I haven't had to. I haven't had the challenges or the responsibilities. I haven't been responsible for other people or the stresses of having to provide for anybody or choose between one thing or the other. And so it's easy as a kid to see those choices and kind of that moral grayness and see it as something bad and something to be avoided, or I'm not going to turn out that way. That's not going to be me. And so there's a lot of that, I think, kind of plays through a lot of these adult characters in the book. And, I hope that the ones who end up being the helpers along the way are a little bit surprising to the reader. The adults who end up being the ones that are helpful and primarily good are a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I mean, even like, along those lines, like, at the beginning, Frances almost sees her parents as sort of antagonists. They're trying to keep her inside, and it's an obstacle. Like, she wants to live her life, she wants to experience the world, and doesn't know the backstory of the reasons why her parents are making these choices. And, you know, obviously they're not villainous. They love her and they're trying to protect her. But yeah, as a kid, all you see is, this is, you know, an obstacle to what I want to do, and I'm going to find a way around it.
Yeah. And the story is told really from her perspective. And I think that when you're looking at the world through a kid's perspective, you're going to have, you know, there are going to be certain aspects of it that are exaggerated and certain aspects of it that are suspicious or dark, that as adults, we might have told the story a different way.
Yeah. And you're a parent, so
I am.
How did that influence the way you wrote this?
You know, this is my first novel, and so the process of writing this book was a long one. From when the idea came to when I first sat down and actually started typing something out, to when I started really seeing it as something that was, you know, kind of taking it seriously as something that I might actually finish and try to put out in the world. And then the publishing process, and it's a long journey. And so I think probably from day one to the day that it actually hit shelves for readers to be able to pick up and read was probably around 6 years. You know, that wasn't 6 years of writing. It was the whole experience, the whole process. But nevertheless, when I started it, my kids were a lot younger than they are now. I've got, my oldest is 15. My youngest is 9. And so, you know, the difference between, you know, the 6 years makes a big difference at those ages. So I think that what's been most interesting is now that my kids have grown up in those 6 years and are older than Frances and have kind of gone through that stage of life, it's been interesting to see how much of the kind of like the anxieties and the insecurities and the like feelings that Frances has and is dealing, just seeing how much of that is reflected in them in ways that I kind of didn't expect. You know, I remember being that age, at least I feel like I remember being that age. I don't know how much of it I've kind of reinvented as the years have gone by, but having to think that through and kind of take that and filter it through a character that is not a lot like me, and not a lot like my kids. It's been interesting to see the ways where they're the kind of the paths cross, or like where the parallels are drawn and the way they mirror each other unexpectedly. It's been a lot of fun. It's also been validating because I think that seeing my kids and seeing them grow up and the things that they're dealing with, I think it's validated some of the things that I've put on the page for Frances, and I'm hopeful that they're able to see those things, if not when they read the book now, you know, someday when they have the benefit of hindsight like I do, they'll be able to see some of that and the way that they were reflected there.
Right. So going back to Frances, so she's definitely, she plays with gender roles as far as her dress and everything is concerned. So
yeah,
how much of that was like intentional, or just this was the character and it just sprang out of her naturally?
Yeah, it really was not. It was not intentional at all. You know, it's interesting because, again, 6 years ago when I was writing this, I don't even know that I was as aware of the. I don't think that the conversation about gender roles and gender identity and things like that, I don't know that I was as aware of it even as I am now. You know, I now know so many people who identify in all sorts of different ways and who express themselves in all sorts of different ways. And, you know, I don't know that I did then. You know, 6 years ago, it's like something that I've learned a lot about since then. And so it was really something that came naturally for the character and was not something that was intentional or driven by any kind of, you know, agenda or goal or even really with an endpoint in mind. Just something that felt really natural for her. And, you know, there are some aspects of who she is and some of the ways that she sees the limits that her femininity kind of puts on her, or that the society at the time puts on her femininity, that are inspired by my wife, who as a kid, she wouldn't mind me saying, she struggled with the idea of growing up to be a woman and the limits that would be put on her, and didn't understand why that would be the case. And she really wanted to rebel against that, and did that in some of the ways that she dressed, and some of the ways that she acted. And, she has been really great about kind of talking about that and helping our kids, explore how they think and feel about who they are and about gender and about society in ways that I think it would have been so helpful for, our generation to have been able to grow up with that kind of understanding and encouragement. So I'm really excited about my kids' generation. I think that they've got something that we maybe, as I'm in my 30s, something that we kind of started to discover, but really didn't feel comfortable, or didn't feel like we had the freedom to discover or explore. They feel no such constraints, and it's really exciting to watch them grow up and just be who they are, whatever that means. And I learn so much from my kids and their friends.
Fair enough. And I appreciate that we have a character like Luca that just kind of rolls with it.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever. You're my friend. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We all need a Luca.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that all kind of culminates in like the swimming scene. Mm-hmm. Like, we've seen Frances's anxiety in crowds and stuff, and then like I think because of the time she spent with Luca and in Hobbs to a degree, she gets undressed there to go swim, and like there are kids that are kind of looking at her strange, but she seems, the anxiety doesn't like overwhelm her, and she's just like, she's with this friend that she trusts and she feels safe. And yeah, I thought that whole swimming scene was one of my favorites. It's beautiful. And, she just kind of floats in the water and kind of like disconnects from her body and is right. Her identity, just free of, any kind of societal constraints and stuff. And it's a really special scene.
Yeah. I love that scene. And that was one that, it's a very like character driven scene. It really is not a plot driven scene. And so it was always on the verge of the chopping block throughout like the editorial process and, in revisions but it was always a scene that I really insisted stay and feel is really important to Frances' story, because it's really a turning point for her, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I think you put it really well. She kind of gets to just disconnect from, who she's been, who she's expected to be, who other people want her to be, who she wants to be. And she just floats, and she gets to just kind of exist for those, precious couple of hours before the adventure continues. And I always felt that was really important for her and really important for her story. So I was really excited that it remained in the manuscript and now is part of the story forever.
Yeah, I didn't even think. Yeah, as soon as you said that, yeah, of course it's not part of the train tracks of the plot. So of course it would be like at risk of not making it in. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Even though it doesn't forward the plot, it's very important to Frances's development that gets you to the end of the plot. So yeah, I'm glad you saved it. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad that it's resonating with people, because again that seems really important to me and important to the character, and so it's great to kind of get a sense for how people are reacting to it now that it's out in the world and people are reading it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: so we have a Professor Grimm. Do we have a Dr. Frankenstein in this world? Does this Dr. Frankenstein exist in this world? Victor?
I think that. Yeah, I think that that Frances's great grandfather, Albert Grimm, he's really the closest that the world has gotten to one at that point. And so Frances being the one who really unexpectedly ends up succeeding where others have failed, and being able to kind of take the final step and solve the equation and really kind of unlock the key to reanimating this monster and creating life where there wasn't one. So I think that her great grandfather got close, but died before he really was able to succeed. And her exploits are really that final step. So she kind of gets to be that Dr. Frankenstein, but
Right.
in an unexpected way, and in a way that's kind of all her own.
Right, exactly. So aside from that, then, is there a Frankenstein movie from like 1930? What 31 was it? Does that exist in this world?
I guess not. I guess it couldn't really. I think that in the reality of Francis's world, again, not everything is purely historical. Hobbes' existence alone, I think, kind of gives you a barometer for how close her reality is to our own. But having that blend of real and fantasy, and as she kind of continues in her adventures, there's the sequel, the second book in the series is my final draft deadline is at the end of this month. So I'm very much like right in the middle of finishing that up, but getting to kind of play with that reality in that world in a kind of a different way and from a different angle has helped to kind of flesh it out and kind of see where the constraints and the boundaries are. But no, I think that the world of science in Francis's world is really that's the playground for all this. It's really less of a Hollywood thing and more of a, the scientific community is far beyond that's where the magic is happening.
Well, I would say, like, of course it couldn't exist in this world because, people haven't learned from the movie and we've got mob mentality and everything. But then, I mean, you think about the real world that we live in and people haven't learned from. So I guess that doesn't really track. But that was something I was going to ask you about. So you have a sequel in the works then, and that's Yep. So, like I said, I'm hoping to finish it up by December 1st, and but it's slated to come out next summer, and so we're going to be announcing the title and revealing the cover and all that good stuff in hopefully right after the new year. I think is the plan. Okay. But very excited. It's definitely an expansion of Francis's world, and gets to play with a lot of the relationships, with her parents that are explored a little bit in the book, but kind of gives a new playground for her to explore her relationship with her parents and meet some new friends and not so friendly new people along the way.
But do we have some not so friendly? I mean, we have a few probably not so friendly old people coming back, but
yeah, yep. A lot of new people. And there are some old friends and enemies that will pop up again to give her trouble in ways that either directly impact her or maybe impact her in ways that she's not quite aware of yet.
Right. And by the way, do you know if the same artist is going to be doing the cover of the new book?
Yes, Brandon Dornan. Yeah, he is just an incredible artist, and so we are really excited to share what he's doing for book 2. Just couldn't have been happier with the cover of this book. When we started the process of imagining the cover and some of the things that we share with Brandon that we wanted expressed on the cover and just to kind of like give him an idea of what we were looking for. It really came down to, let the city, like show the city, show the character of the city, and kind of give that sense of the scale of, where Frances starts and then her journey through the city. And he just captured it so perfectly. It's just such a great cover. I'm just so happy with it. Yeah.
It's like you said, that's the thing, is like having them centered so small, it puts you in, like how you felt when you were a kid and just the world was so big. And, it's, it really draws you into the story. So yeah, it's a great cover for, I know we're not supposed to judge books by their covers, but
Right.
it definitely,
it's a nice cover.
yeah.
Yeah, in this case, I say go for it because I feel like it represents the story really well. I think it actually captures the tone and kind of the scope of the book really well. And so, if you like the cover, I think that you'll like the story. I think that they really do go hand in hand.
Well, we're definitely excited about the new one. That's going to be. I'll be
watching for that.
Yeah, as news comes out, we'll definitely be keeping listeners updated because
I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you have at least one other kind of project that you're kind of constantly working on. Do you have anything else you want to share?
Yeah, well, right now we are in the middle of Dinovember, which is a monthly or an annual holiday, I guess, tradition that my wife Susan and I started about 10 years ago now. It's actually the 10th anniversary of the first Dinovember. But we have a band of plastic dinosaurs that come to life every year and cause all sorts of messes and chaos and destruction in our house. Started in 2012, and it's now spread to plastic dinosaurs in more than 60 countries around the world. And we've got a series of picture books, the What the Dinosaurs Did series, that we just last year came out with the third in the series, What the Dinosaurs Did the Night Before Christmas. But yeah, we're right in the middle of that. So the dinosaurs have been they've been cheating at Battleship. They have been creating precarious towers of books. They have been surfing in the bathtub. They have been going to war with tin robots using projectile toast and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were originally talking and you mentioned it, I was like, I'm not familiar with this. I'm gonna have to look this up. And I was like, this is such a fun idea. And it's like, I think a lot of people know about like Elf on the Shelf, but this feels so much. Yeah, because there's no it's not that the elf is watching you. There's no surveillance. It's just joy. It's just childhood. It's just fun. And yeah, I mean, that's just fantastic.
Nobody believes us, but we genuinely had no idea that Elf on the Shelf existed when we started this. And it wasn't until people were like, oh, like Elf on the Shelf. And so we were looking into it. And yeah, the dinosaurs don't, they're not trying to spy on you and make sure you behave. That is definitely not what they're doing. If anything, they are terrible influences on children.
As they should be.
As they should be. They really are. The dinosaurs are children without limits. They are children without consequences. They are what children would be with, I imagine, without any kind of parental guidance whatsoever. So it's a lot of fun to see what mischief they get into and how the human children around them react.
This is interesting because we've had another author, Don Glued, who's big into dinosaurs, but also big into Frankenstein or Frankenstein adjacent stuff.
Must be some kind of
do you think there's
primal connection between the two? Well, I mean, the dinosaurs come to life once a year. They're plastic and inanimate until then, and then suddenly they're alive and causing all sorts of havoc. So there are certainly some parallels to Frankenstein there. They also are very childlike and don't always know their own destructive powers. So yeah, I guess maybe there's more parallels than I probably realized until right now.
Fair enough.
Well, the parallels with the book are there as well with, it's about children sort of unchecked away from their parents, sort of getting into trouble and, having their own like run of the world basically.
Yeah, and it doesn't always go as planned. There's fun and there's danger and there's all sorts. Frances certainly makes plenty of messes along the way. So
absolutely, her poor prior babysitters.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Hobbs being the just the latest in a long line of tutors and caretakers who Francis has absolutely driven off. He's not the first to lose their head, although he might be the first to do so literally. But she's certainly she's well practiced at causing all sorts of problems.
As children should be.
Mm-hmm.
I say that as someone who does not have children.
As someone who has plenty of children, I can tell you that they definitely know how to cause trouble.
So obviously, as a parent, that obviously had some bearing on the story as well, coming especially from Victor's side. Is there something that you drew from that particularly, or?
Yeah, I don't know that there's much that's autobiographical in the story, but the ways that I think as an author, the ways that my experiences end up in the story, I had to try and articulate this recently. And what I came up with was, it's kind of like the vibes that you get into the story. It's like you have these experiences as a kid or as a parent, and you feel these things, and you have these emotional reactions to things. And in my case, at least, I feel like it's not the experiences themselves that end up being drawn on in the story, but it's kind of those feelings that you feel and those ways that those experiences impact you, and the ways that they cause you to think differently, or the ways that you kind of internalize them a little bit. That's what ends up in the story. So I think, with Victor, there's probably plenty of that is kind of that, the way that he cares for her and worries about her. And, he knows that she has unique challenges, and he knows firsthand how fragile she is, and how strong she is and wants to be. And so the way that he tries to care for her, I think that is something that I can certainly relate to. So that feeling of really just wanting to take care of this kid and wanting what's best for her, and knowing that he's doing it in a way that is frustrating her, and that is limiting her, and that she's chafing against it. That's a hard thing as a parent. You don't want them to see you as an obstacle. You don't want to be standing in their way. You want to empower them to be the best version of themselves, but it's not always easy to figure out how to do that. And the ways that, as a parent, the ways that you choose to address challenges or issues in a kid's life, whether it's something that they need to learn, or it's something that they are a problem that they're causing for themselves or for others, whatever the case might be, you do it the best you can. And 6 times out of 10, maybe in a good year, they're going to really not like you for it. And you just hope that someday they look back and like, man, I'm glad that my parents forced me to do this, or didn't let me do that, or were constantly reminding me of this or that. But yeah, it's the balance of wanting what's best for them long term, and wanting to be able to connect with them, short term, in the moment, on any given day. And those two things are often at odds with each other. And I think Victor and Mary both experience that in very different ways. I think they have very different personalities and approaches to Francis, but I think their goal and their intention is the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like, as I get older, I feel like, like you said, as a kid, there were some things my parents did that I was, good with. And then there were things that, that frustrated me as a kid. And as I got older, I was like, oh, I see, their good intentions here. But I think even as I get even older, I start to even realize, like, the things they did that aren't defensible, the things they just completely failed at, they're just, it happens, and I can even give them grace for that, even this times where I as a kid was actually probably in the right and they were wrong. I understand, I understand where they're coming from, or that, we're all imperfect and we're going to make mistakes. So I'm sure that, like something like in, Mary in this, that kind of, it keeps pushing Francis to be a little bit more like gender conforming, and it's like, right, that she's in the wrong there, but I understand where she's coming from, and like where she feels like she's helping Francis, and theoretically, as Mary and Francis grow older together, I'm sure that they will come to some sort of understanding in time.
Yeah, and what I love about Mary is that from Francis's perspective, Mary doesn't have very many redeeming qualities. And so in the book, I feel like Mary, you could read it as Mary really getting short shrift compared to Victor, because the way that Frances sees Mary and the way she sees Victor are very different. And I think that she has a lot more warmth towards her father than she does towards her mother. But I think my hope, at least, is that as a parent reading this, or even just as an adult reading this, to be able to kind of see where Frances's perspective might not be entirely reliable when it comes to Mary. Mary's doing the best she can. She has taken an approach to the challenges in her life, and she she's had some success with that approach, and she's trying to share that approach with Frances and say, look, this is how you got to do it. This is how I did it. And so that's how you got to do it.
Yeah. From her perspective, she's sharing what works as far as
right,
she knows.
Right. This is what worked for me. Mm-hmm. And so this is what's going to work for you. And, what she's maybe not as good at is seeing that Frances is very different from her, and that, she might need her own approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the books and your plans for the future, how many are we talking here? Maybe if you could say that. I don't know if you're allowed to.
Sure. Well, there's always some ambiguity in the publishing world. There will definitely be a sequel, and that's going to be that's slated for next summer. And then I'm hoping to be able to cap it off with one final book that will kind of wrap up her saga in a satisfying way. The plan has always been kind of. I'm not much of a. I don't like to set my plans in stone and say, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do that. But I think that for Frances, I always kind of had a sense for the beginning, the middle, and the end. Mm-hmm. How exactly I navigate through the beginning and the middle and the end was always a little bit more, nebulous and flexible. But this book that I'm finishing up now and that we'll be releasing next year is very much the middle part of the story. And so I think that there is still one more story to tell after that kind of shows the completion of this part of Frances's journey and the other characters that, her friends that she's made along the way. Okay.
So in that case, do you also plan on maybe playing around in that world a little bit more after the last story is told for Frances?
Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of the characters that she interacts with, were a lot of fun to write. And, in particular, I think that there are all sorts of possibilities for, Frances's kind of sidekicks, Luca, Fritz, and Hobbs, and adventures that they could have that would be maybe have a slightly different tone than Frances's stories. Right. But, a lot of that. And there is a lot of the sewer man, Mr. Ganji. Mm-hmm. That is a character that has been one that I've been kind of playing with and kind of building up for years before even starting work on Frances and the Monster. So he is somebody that I have put a disproportionate amount of time and thought, and I don't know what it is about him, but
I love him. He's a great character.
That character has always fascinated me and was a ton of fun to write. And so I think that's one place where, having some spin-off stories for Mr. Ganji in some form, probably a shorter form than a novel, but I think that would be a lot of fun to do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got to love an ambiguous character. They may be friend, they may be foe. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, they're absolutely creepy.
Yeah.
Whether they're being friendly or not, they're a total creep. So
we're definitely very, very, very much looking forward to hearing the rest of Frances's adventures and whatever comes after that. We'll definitely be watching to see where you go next.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So I guess, do you want to tell people where they can find you and where
Sure.
they can find the book?
Yeah, so you can find me and information about the books at refetuma.com. That'll have all of the links to order the book, ways to contact me, and where you can find me on social media. But you can also, I'm pretty active on Twitter, and you can find me at Refeup, so REFEUP. And would love to hear from you, and always available for school visits and library visits for kids who are, ages usually 5th grade through middle school. And the announcement for book 2, we're hoping I'll be able to share that within the next few weeks or just after the holidays. But very excited to be able to make that announcement and tell you all about book 2. So you'll have to wait just a little bit longer for that. But I'm excited about it and can't wait to get that one out in the world.
Yeah. We both, I think it's pretty clear from the conversation, but we both really, really enjoyed this first book. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out for the next one and hopefully the next one after that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We had a lot of fun talking to you. We appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and been really enjoying all of the Frankenstein content that you guys have been putting out in the world. So keep it up. I'll keep listening.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you're listening. That means a lot. All
right, Anthony, where can they find us as well?
So you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at The Frankencast. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. We're also over on Patreon, patreon.com/The Frankencast. And, we'd love to hear from anybody about anything. We'd love to hear what you all think about the book. Hope, people go out and check it out because we highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And as always, any interaction's good interaction. So for the most part, yeah. So other than that, I guess to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.